Dear Ma and Pa MAGA, you wouldn't trust a man who said he'd date his own daughter to drive yours home from school, would you? You wouldn't want a judge called a rapist, to teach your granddaughter ballet. You wouldn't hand your company's books to someone who got punished for cooking his own. You wouldn't ask a serial philanderer who bragged about grabbing women's privates to be the pastor at your church. You wouldn't invoice someone notorious for not paying his bills. And you sure as shit wouldn't put a convicted felon in charge of anything you and your loved ones depended on every single day of your lives, let alone the air you breathe, the food you eat, and the money in your pocket. So why on earth would you want someone you wouldn't trust with any of that to be in charge of our country, in charge of our economy, the world's second largest nuclear arsenal, and our very democracy itself? It's not that he's especially smart. It's not his track record of success. It's not his military service. It's not even that you really, really like him, because you don't. Not really. He's a jerk. No one really, really likes him. You want Donald Trump back in the White House because he hates who you hate, because that gives you permission to embrace your own hate, to loudly and proudly hate they, them, those people, the ones you blame for all your troubles, the ones who are responsible for all the things you were promised because of your God-given birthright, but didn't get. He hates them too. Why is that all you think you need? My guest this week is Ken Weber, co-author of the book Rebranding Democrats, a top-to-bottom reimagining of campaign strategies. This practical, easy-to-read guide outlines the branding blunders Democrats continually make and delivers specific steps the party can take to turn things around. The need could not be more urgent. All hands on deck. We are open to every suggestion. Our democracy is literally at stake. Welcome to the Are You Effing Kidding Me podcast. Ken Weber, co-author of Rebranding Democrats, a top to bottom reimagining of campaign strategies. Hi, Ken.
JoJo or Joe, it's really a pleasure to be on with you. I've been a fan. I don't want to come across as a jerk, but I'm a fan of yours. I think what you do is terrific.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that because, I just run my mouth a lot. I didn't do anything as organized or concise or helpful and instructive as write a book, a top to bottom reimagining of campaign strategies like you did. So thank you for this, because
I got to give credit. Well, I co-wrote it with my son,
right,
who actually is a nationally known branding expert, Daryl Weber.
And, well, Daryl,
yes, we wrote it together. Yep.
Hat tip to Daryl as well. But I fully enjoyed this book, and I love this idea of branding in terms of politics, because we could think about branding in terms of Coca-Cola or Double Mint gum, but we don't often think about branding in terms of the brand that is the Democratic Party as a whole. And so let's just start there. And what was the sort of impetus or inspiration to look at things in this framework and then write this book, which is really a how-to guide?
Yeah, it's a small book. People can read it in one afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
It's available on Amazon, Branding Democrats. Listen, let's start with a definition. You're really showing it for those.
And Vanna White.
Who are watching it, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a difference between marketing and branding. So marketing is here's our campaign guy or woman, and this is why you should vote for her or him. And the other person that they're running against is terrible. That's, and then in 2 years, if it's a congressional seat, you start all over again. Branding is what the Democrats stand for. 3 elections ago, 2 elections ago, 3 elections from now, 5 elections from now, what the Democrats stand for. Republicans have done a much, much better job, thanks to people like Frank Luntz and other experts, in terms of branding Republicans. And Republicans, conversely, have done a great job about branding us, branding Democrats, tax and spend liberals and all that, socialists. And we have done a terrible job of branding ourselves, so that for the 18-year-old, the 19-year-old who's never voted before, goes into a voting booth, who should I vote for? Oh, yeah, Democrats stand for women's rights and workers' rights and LGBTQ rights and so on like that. So marketing versus branding. Branding, Democrats is about the long-term branding.
Right. So that you said, like, when they go into the voting booth, let's just say they're really, they maybe know the top two on the ticket. They won't know in many cases all the other names, but if they see that D, they should want to get them to a place, society to a place, the electorate to a place where they're like, I know what that means. I may not know this specific candidate, their specific causes or policies or platforms, but I know largely what that party represents.
Yeah, exactly. And as Daryl, my co-author, and my son, who's a true branding expert, he points out that in surveys, if you ask people, do you want rational gun control? Yes or no? Should a woman be allowed to control her own future, her own destiny? Should we protect workers' rights? Should we protect the environment? People will say yes, 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 yes. But I'm going to vote for Trump because I think he's whatever he is.
Yeah.
Not realizing you're voting against your self-interest. We are on your side. By the way, in the book, I think it's there. Yeah, I wrote the book almost 2 years ago, so I forgot. We have the slogan, Democrats fight for the people. Democrats, and we want that to be the slogan for the next 10 years, because that's, since FDR, it's the Democrats who fight for the people. Republicans fight for the billionaires and the corporations.
And themselves in their own power, and the guy who promises to be a dictator on day one. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know where to start, because it's maddening, because what I do every day and what you're doing in this book is I try to drive home what the Democrats are doing. They are the far superior product. If these were consumers we're talking about, and they are consumers in a certain way, the voter is a consumer, right? And the Democratic Party is a far superior product, because they are the ones who are working for Americans. They are the ones who do want those things that you said that they identify they want. And somewhere in between what the Democrats are actually doing and the message that the voter is receiving and all the noise in between, there's this disconnect where that breaks down. And even my own peers, I see it, where they don't attribute anything good to President Biden or to the Democrats largely. They don't make the connection. They make the negative connections all the time.
Right.
But what's the breakdown? What's happening in there?
Yeah. So I do TikToks. Branding Dems. I'm an old guy, but I do TikTok.
I love it.
33,000 followers and climbing.
That's huge.
And, I've done a few lives, and people will, not just for me, but for other Dems who do lives, you'll hear a guy, well, can you just tell me one thing? And you can just hear it in their voice. They think they got a gotcha question. Can you just tell me one thing, that Joe Biden has done for America?
Where do you want to start?
I want to say, you only watch Fox News, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They never heard of the infrastructure bill or the CHIPS Act or the Inflation Reduction Act or the helping veterans or any of that stuff.
The PACT Act.
Brand new.
Right. Or the fact that we're actually drilling more than any country in history when it comes to oil. But if you ask them what Donald Trump has done for them or Republicans have done for them, they also don't have an answer, right? They'll say something nebulous like saved America or fought off the
border. Yeah, the border.
The border.
And gasoline was $1.99. Not realizing, yes, it was during COVID when nobody was driving anywhere.
Right. And that's the other thing in terms of messaging. For some reason, they want us to forget about Trump's time in office with COVID and how that impacted his, let's say, record on jobs, on the economy, et cetera, et cetera. But they're not giving Biden that first year of his administration to have to deal with inflation and the supply chain. And so they want to attribute all the things that happened during the pandemic to Biden's overall record, but remove them from Trump's. And it's, again, they're successful. They are very successful at sort of revising history and truths and facts and messaging and making all of these mistruths so sticky. And like, why are they so good at it? Is it because of it's embedded in hate and fear? Like, why are they so good at it?
Yeah, well, Democrats have a severe handicap, Joe.
We're good people.
We try to tell the truth.
Oh yeah, that.
that. I mean, just this morning I heard Trump again saying, it was the best economy ever. No, it wasn't. we try and I've been pointing out recently the three worst presidents in terms of unemployment to hand off to the next president were Hoover, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump.
Yeah.
They were in American history. Those are the three worst, all Republicans.
Yeah.
Handed off to Democrats to clean up the mess.
Yeah.
Ask the average person if they even know that. They don't know that. If you ask, the surveys say, just this morning on Morning Joe, there was the survey about Americans think the economy is the unemployment rate is the worst it's been in 50 years.
It's backwards.
It's actually the best it's been in 50 years.
That's upside down.
But the majority of Americans think it's the worst unemployment in 50 years. That's the latest poll. So we try to actually deal in facts. Republicans they don't care about facts. Certainly Trump says, whatever he says, the jury is tainted, the judge is tainted, look where he comes from. They just make shit up.
Mm-hmm.
Am I allowed to say that in F?
Oh yeah, you can say, yeah, you're gonna say whatever the hell you want. But think about what you said there. Our disadvantage is that we are adhering to the truth. I mean, that this is the world that we live in, and yes, there's always been fudging and sort of inflating in politics, and the rhetoric has always been obviously not exactly the letter to the letter of honesty. But this is something different we're talking about right now, where we're talking about, was January 6th a violent insurrection, or was it a peaceful protest that Antifa was behind? Like, these are this is the chasm in between the truth and the distorted reality that they're pushing, and getting through that noise with the truth, which is not so sexy all the time, is really challenging, which is why, again, a book like this is so important, because it's so concise and to the point, and just follow these steps, which we can talk about.
I will tell you, if I can brag just for a minute, because this just happened an hour ago, a woman who is running a local Democratic club, I won't name names, but she handed the book off a couple of weeks ago to the state Democratic chairman, and his quote was, "This book is perfect, exactly what we need." That was a state Democratic chairman. I won't say who it is because I don't have permission to do that. But the difference between, there's a lot of people who say this is what Democrats should do, but it's, newspaper article, you turn the page, it's gone. A book has gravitas, it has staying power, and it was meant to be a manual. Do this, don't do that.
I mean, that's what we need, though. We need so that stuff doesn't get stuck in all the noise and in the weeds. It's like, it's literally black and white. It's A plus B equals C. This is a template that can be followed and applied, and that's an incredibly important thing to have. But I want to throw out, let's say, recent history and past history. Are there some Democratic candidates or politicians who have been more effective at this, at creating like this brand identity that has been successful and sustaining and sticky and really elevated their careers? And have there been Democrats that you would point to that are less effective? And then I want to talk about how effective Biden is and why that doesn't trickle down or translate to like the masses.
Who's effective? I mean, the ones who win.
Yeah, well, that's right. Unless they're running unopposed in like super blue areas.
That's the shorthand.
Right.
In the book, we give the example of Joel Ossoff in Atlanta. Yeah. He ran for Congress, and he backed off by saying he's a Democrat when he was running for Congress. That was when Obama, I can't even remember back then, but there was a whole bunch of people who wouldn't admit if they voted for Obama or not. Mm-hmm. And he lost. Yeah. Now, then when he ran a few years later, he ran for Senate. He ran for Senate, and he was a proud progressive Democrat. He didn't back off. Guess what? In a red state, Georgia, he won.
Yeah.
So he's like the prime example. He's exhibit number one. Don't back off your principles.
Right. And that authenticity, right? That is crucial in your principles, being clear about them, but being authentic in the way that you talk about the things that are important to you. Because when you bring that passion, like Obama was so good at, the idea of hope and change, but the passion, yes, he's a good orator. Not everyone is, but Ossoff is very much in that style of Obama's, speaking ability, and the way that he pauses and even the rhythm and rhyme of it. It always reminds me of Obama, but it's effective. But that passion coming from a true place within, I feel like, that's my approach to social media also, but I feel like that is how you are the most effective in delivering a message that really hits people and stays with them.
Yeah, so the book has lots of examples like that, but let me get to, unfortunately, what I'm about to tell you, we thought of after the book was published.
Mm-hmm.
We synthesized the whole book down to 5 words. You ready?
Yeah.
The party, not the person.
Right.
The party, not the person. Meaning, every candidate is flawed. Joe Biden will never not be old. Every candidate has flaws. Focus on the party, not the individual person.
Yeah.
If we can do that, if we can brand what the Democrats stand for, as I said earlier, I know people come and go at a podcast. What we said earlier is, if you do a survey, most people agree with most things that Democrats stand for: rational gun control, women's rights, workers' rights, immigrant rights, protecting our senior citizens, and down the list, And then they vote for Republicans because they don't know why. Brand the party. You're sort of in the New York metro market for television. You get, yeah.
Yep.
So,
WABC, all that. WNBC.
yeah. So when we talked about that briefly in the book, every 2 years, when it's the congressional races, you got we see 6, 7, 8 TV commercials for the different Democratic candidates for Congress, from Long Island to New Jersey to Connecticut. They're all trying to get, and they're all telling us how great Tom Malinowski is and how great, any of them are, and how terrible Lee Zeldin is, or whatever it might be. This Democrat is great, and that Republican in that district is terrible. We're wasting our money. It's the same message. What we're hoping to get to happen is for the Democratic establishment to say, pool your resources, focus on getting the message across who are Democrats.
And the thing is, it's the truth. It's the truth that are not lying about who they are and what they're offering and what they want to do and their agenda for moving this little experiment of ours forward, for perfecting, right, this imperfect union. That is the truth. I mean, there's some brand legitimacy to that. That is also the antithesis of what Republicans are bringing to the table.
Democrats fight for the people. Democrats, since FDR, we are the party that fights for the needs and the hopes and the dreams of the American people. The Republicans fight for the billionaires and for themselves, for power, and for the corporations. And yet the messages have gotten all screwed up. But if you look at, what FDR did and what JFK stood for and what LBJ did in voting rights and so on, and then Obamacare, and now Biden, all the great things he's done for the people. And what legislation did Trump pass in 4 years? Oh, yeah, tax cut.
Tax cut.
For the billionaires.
Tax cut. That's it. Well,
that's it.
Yeah. And that was really what they wanted more than anything. Yeah. And that tax cut is going to saddle us with, and our grandkids, by the way, with crippling debt for generations.
As we pointed out in the book, under Trump, who promised to reduce or eliminate the deficit, he increased it by $1 trillion before COVID.
Some statistics show that he also increased the national debt, I think the third most of any president in modern history. I mean, and before COVID, we were already trending in that direction, largely thanks to that tax cut. But so you identified this sort of cohesion, right? So, pooling resources, et cetera. What are some other ways in the book that you outline what are the marching orders? How can I participate? How can the average citizen, but how can the Democratic Party do this better?
Yeah. The subtitle is a top to bottom reimagining of campaign strategies. And when we say top to bottom, we're talking about the presidential race down to your local. I just spoke with my son at a Long Island chapter of a Democratic group, and there was a woman running for state Senate, New York State Senate. And she's got her signs, and I told her what we'd like Democrats to do. And I saw her write that down with a big smile on her face. Yard signs. So top to bottom, all the way down to yard signs. Why? Republicans seem to be the party of patriotism. They wear their little flag lapels. They put their flags up. They've stolen patriotism.
Yeah.
And we let it happen. So let's take patriotism back. Amen. And what we say is a simple thing like yard signs should say, Joe Schmo, State Senate, proud American, proud Democrat.
I love it. I mean, it's brilliant. Why not reclaim, like you said, there's small and big things that can be done and everything in the middle, but why should we allow them to co-opt these things like the flag, like patriotism, like loving and supporting the military and our police? Like all of those things are upside down and inside out. We're talking about a party that represents the antithesis of all of that. We can show people how, but beyond that, and we can do both, right? We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can show people how they're not the things that they say they are, but also reclaim our space, reclaim that flag. That I still fly an American flag. I will forever fly an American flag as long as I'm not in the gulag.
I couldn't love you anymore, but now I love you more.
Let me tell you,
Good for you.
I'll tell you what, it pisses me. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I have been unabashed about this on social media too. It pisses me the fuck off that they think they can take our flag. Like,
yeah.
Bullshit. My dad served his entire he was in the reserves, but he spent his entire adult life in the Department of Defense as an engineer. My brother was a Marine. My two sisters, well, my sister was both were Army. Let's say one was actually active duty Army. My sister Kim was in the Air Force and flew after 9/11, flew the B-1 over Afghanistan. My nephew is in the Air Force. My father worked on a military base. Let me tell you what, the flag to me represents the lives that have been sacrificed for this country, but it represents the promise of this country that we can keep moving, right? I am so proud of the promise. No, is it perfect? Does it live up to every expectation and hope we've ever had at this moment in time? No, but that's not what it's really supposed to be, right? I believe it's supposed to be that we're all working towards all of that. And I get so pissed off when they say that we don't love the flag or that we're not patriotic, because that's bullshit. In fact, it's flatly false on its head, upside down, inside out, because they are the ones who will dismantle this country and dismantle this democracy faster. That's what they're working towards right now than the Democrats. And so, yeah, I just had to rant there because I want that back. I want our military back. I want our flag back. I want my anthem back. I want all of that back. And I love this idea of the signs and making me like, no, I'm a patriot.
Yeah. And every candidate from coast to coast on their yard signs, proud Democrat, proud American.
I love it.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah.
Let's start. That's branding. If we all do it, if every candidate does it, 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 6 years from now, yeah, Democrats care as much about America, Mr. or Ms. Republican, as you do, maybe more, because we stand up for the ideals of America.
Right.
We stand up and fight for a more perfect union.
We're actually trying to make sure that our veterans have access to health care. We appreciate our veterans. You know what I mean? So this is another thing too, because there's also there's so much opposite messaging coming from the Republicans that they're even able to craft whole narratives about things that don't exist and apply those to the Democrats as the Democratic identity, right? So like as their brand, Republicans are able to say that the fascist, socialists, Nazis, Marxists, woke indoctrinators who want to make your kid turn into a furry who strips at a drag queen brunch library. I mean, you know what I mean?
It's hard to be serious with you. You're so good at this.
And they're teaching CRT to cats. I don't know. But the whole point is like they have not only branded themselves as the patriot, police loving, military loving, non-insurrectionists, but they're also telling the world that the Democrats want to make their kids, gay cats. So like, what? But
gay cats, right?
And it works. Like you talk about focus groups a lot, but taking some focus groups with a grain of salt, but also the importance of focus groups.
Well,
you want to shape what they say.
Groups.
Yeah. So
right.
So
okay. Let me jump in here for a minute.
Yeah, please do.
My son, who's a branding expert, he actually has done for his professional life focus groups. And he's the one who wrote the chapter on focus. There's a small page or two in the book about focus groups. And what he says is you don't have focus groups to find out what people care about. You do your branding until you hear those brands, that messaging back at the focus group. That's how you do it.
Right. That's successful. That is successful branding. That is successful messaging. Yeah.
Right.
And the trick is having top to bottom guides to get there, starting with yard signs. What else are we talking about?
Well, we have a whole section on what words to use, for example. So one of my pet peeves is pro-life. We have a whole section on Democrats should old words, new words, and no Democrat should utter the words ever pro-life.
Right.
No, we are pro-life.
Yeah.
You are pro-forced birth.
Yeah.
Or, and if you want to be polite, you could say you're anti-choice.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to say pro-forced birth.
Right.
Don't let them own that. That's a Frank Luntz. He came up with that.
Yeah.
Pro-life. No, they're not pro-life at all. Once the baby is born, it's Democrats who want universal health care, universal pre-K, maternity leave. We're the ones that are pro-freaking life.
Right. Meanwhile, they're the ones who don't want to feed hungry kids in the summer, even though the federal government was offering them money to feed hungry kids in the summer. And they will tell you that they're pro-life. They're the ones who will let a woman die of sepsis, potentially, we'll see with the Supreme Court, in the parking lot of a hospital before letting her have an abortion, but they're pro-life. Greg Abbott is so pro-life that he argued for and then still put up in the Rio Grande razor wire to drown migrant children. This is how pro-life they are. But like, again, they keep co-opting these messages, and we have the truth and the facts and what the Democrats are actually standing for in our favor. And we need to learn the more effective ways to get from point A to point B, which is the truth, to the ears and minds and hearts of the voter.
And that's where, if we can get Democrats to pool their resources, hopefully, eventually, we can get introduced to some of the big donors, and we can get ads on. I think some of the TikTok creators, including you, should be doing the commercials that we see on television.
Mm-hmm.
Because the traditional ads, the voice of God ads, Mr. Smith is terrible, and Mrs. Smith is Mrs. Jones, the Democrat, is wonderful. And just these standard from the 1950s templates that they use. No, get real people, TikTok people, just talking. I'm a nurse and I'm a Democrat because.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a farmer and I'm a Democrat because. I'm in the military and I'm strongly a Democrat because.
Mm-hmm.
Out in the field, out in the hangar, out in the wherever they're, the teachers. I'm a teacher and I'm certainly a Democrat because Democrats have always been strongly behind me in both the union and supporting the whole concept of free education for everybody.
Yeah. I love all of that because personal stories are the most effective way to deliver any message on any issue. If you ask me honestly, because people do respond, as you know, this is so much of this is emotional, and the stuff that sticks with us, the stuff that really embeds itself when we're going to do things like vote or not, right? If you want to motivate someone to vote who might not otherwise want to, or when they are voting, if you want to motivate them to vote for the Democrats, you got to kind of hit them in the center, and in that emotional component is huge. So I love the emphasis on personal storytelling and real people telling real stories, because that's what resonates too. But
and that's where, if we can get some donors, some big donors to say, let's do these ads. Forget about the Democratic National Committee. They don't listen. They're stuck in their ways. The consultants is a whole industry.
Yeah.
I tell people when they ask me, who should I donate to or how should I donate? I say, when you get those emails, I was told this by a politician, and you donate that way, a lot of the money goes to the consultants. Shh. But if we have donors who can help us just get these new 21st century ads out on the air, I think they'd be very effective. I hope it's not too late.
Well, I'm an optimist, and I don't believe it's too late. But
let me just say, I don't want to forget this. People will say to us, to you and me, and you're not going to change any minds. They're right for most people, but in many elections, many states, many districts, 1 or 2%. All we need to change from red to blue, or from not voting to blue, is 1 or 2%.
Mm-hmm.
That's enough to probably hold the Senate and hold the White House.
Yeah. And I mean, to that point too, what we've seen with so many of these ballot measures, and as far as abortion rights go and reproductive rights go in red states, by the way, as you know, so much of what we've seen is when you sort of isolate issues down for the American people into, this is an issue, this is a democracy issue. Like abortion rights, that is a democracy issue. Being able to choose what you get to do with your own body is a democracy issue. And 17 districts in Ohio, I talk about this all the time, that went for Trump, voted on issue 1 to affirm reproductive rights, abortion rights. And what they identified time after time, exit polling, blah, 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 is that for them, it was about freedom, right? It wasn't it wasn't an abortion issue. That might not have been an issue that resonated with them specifically, but it was a democracy issue. And I think there's a lot of room there to get those people who are still reachable, because they were reachable when it came to a ballot measure in what, 9 or 8 red states. Well, I don't know if they were all red. Every state that's put one up has gotten overwhelming support from people who voted against their own party. And I feel like there's a lot of room there to, I don't want to say exploit, but to sort of like open our arms and welcome them into the party. But how do we fold all that into the brand?
It's all the messaging. It's all the branding messaging about talking, not about the specific candidates. Again, the book comes down to 5 words: the party, not the person.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to spend money, resources, effort into getting the long-term messaging across. It's women's rights, it's workers' rights, it's rational gun control, it's protecting the climate. This is not global warming, which sounds kind of nice.
Yeah.
Climate emergency.
Yeah.
It's an emergency. The wildfires are worse than ever. The floods are worse than ever. The hurricanes, the tornadoes are more frequent, and they're worse than ever. In Florida, they can't get insurance these days, the homeowners, because they have so many floods and hurricanes now.
Yeah.
This is clearly a problem with global warming. Even that plane that had the turbulence and sadly one person died, they say pilots are seeing this more often again, likely because of global change, climate change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's all connected, and we've got to say Democrats are the sane party that follow the advice of 98% of climate scientists, and all those issues that people actually do care about.
Yeah, 1,000% the kitchen table stuff, and also the stuff that's going to impact our present, but more for me as a mom, my children's futures and their children's futures. That's the stuff that moves the needle for me. I wonder what you think the utility is in sort of amplifying the truth about Republicans and the dangers that Republicans represent, and that component of, I hate to say it because it's not really the same, but it is fear, but it's not fear mongering because it's based in truth. But like the Republicans are telling us all of the awful things that they promise to do while not offering anything positive. But people will tell you, don't talk about Trump. You talk about Trump too much. It's not helping the Democrats to talk about Republicans too much. But I personally think that there is room for both. But what do you think in terms of utility as far as branding, messaging, getting things to stick? Does it help to tell the world how bad Republicans are?
I think so. Yeah, there's 2 kinds of branding. There's branding Democrats to let people know we are the party that fights for the people, always have, always will. They don't.
Mm-hmm.
And they have done a lot of bad things. I mean, they're screwing up women's lives by the hundreds of thousands. They're screwing up schools by the hundreds of thousands. They're screwing up healthcare. Trump promised to repeal and replace Obamacare on day 1. It's always a week away, a week away, a week away. Never came. Promised to have infrastructure next week, 4 years later, nothing.
Biden did it.
Sorry?
But Biden got it done.
Biden got it done in 2 years.
Yeah.
A massive program, and it's wonderful.
Right.
So it surely behooves us to brand ourselves, Democrats, at the same time say, here's the reality about Republicans. They are not for you. They are for the Koch family and the Walmart family and the multi-billionaires and the oil companies. They are not for you. FDR, JFK, LBJ, Carter, Obama, Biden, all of us, we have all done these things for you, the people. Always have, always will, yesterday, today, tomorrow, and 6 months and 6 years and 15 years from today.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it's interesting too, because Democrats are out there trying to get all of these things done and actually getting these things done. And in this climate, in that Congress, that is really, really hard to do. But the Republicans aren't doing any of it. They aren't even trying. They aren't even pretending to. I mean, they're saving dishwashers and toaster ovens. But like, aside from that, they're obstructing real legislation on the border and running on the border. But
when you ask people, the Republicans own the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
Okay. What, and they said crime on the streets and blah, 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 when they ran against our congressmen here in New York area. Crime is out of hand. Okay. Crime is out of hand. You've had 2 years. Where's the single piece of legislation you passed to help the situation? I'm sorry?
Yep.
Excuse me?
Nope. I don't know. Well, we're gonna impeach Mayorkas. How's that? And by the way, how's your dishwasher? Because you're welcome. But for real, like, yeah. But the thing is, my point there too is that they don't even try to pretend to do anything for the American people because they're relying on the fact that their messaging strategy of branding the Democrats as all of these scary things and these indoctrinators and Marxist socialists, like I said before, that's going to drive the message beyond so loudly that the stuff that the Democrats are actually getting done all the time won't get through. And they're not even pretending to be actual legislators anymore. It's
Right.
crazy.
I talk about, not in the book, but because it happened afterwards. I think it was Representative Chip Roy, a conservative congressman who stood in the well of the House of Representatives. I think he resigned finally, but he said, show me one piece of legislation. You remember this?
Yeah, one thing.
Exactly.
I can go back to my constituents and say we did. Show me one thing.
You know it.
Oh, yeah.
Those are his exact words.
Yeah.
And of course, I'd love to say crickets, but that's a dog that got shot, so we can't say.
Rest in peace, cricket.
But he asked that rhetorical question to his colleagues, and it was crickets. There was no response because they had not come up with one thing, as he said, that I can go back to my constituents and say this is what we campaigned on, or this is what we worked on. Nothing.
Right. But they don't figure they need that, right? They don't figure they need to have anything because they're doing all this other stuff, this hair on fire, histrionic, performative stuff.
Right. But if there was coordinated Democratic branding messages,
yeah,
not about there's 435 House races, 100 Senate races. Well, but the House is every 2 years, 435. Stop talking about each one individually. It's the party, not the person. Pool our resources. Big push to get the Democratic branding out, the branding, what we stand for, what they stand for. If you give the people clearly the differences between the two parties, it is stark, it's clear, and it's compelling.
Yeah, and I know we don't want to talk about specific candidates necessarily, but since you said Chip Roy, I immediately thought of Tom Suozzi, who is New York 3. You may know this gentleman who has, I think, sort of tweaked the reality that we have been contending with, where it was just, I mean, that was George Santos. Talk about the greatest glow up in congressional history. That was George Santos's seat. So this guy who, again, flaunted his criminality like the Trumpian playbook. Like, yeah, I'm a criminal. So what? Was I a drag queen? There's pictures. Not true. Fake news. Like the worst that could ever be. But that congressional seat went to Tom Suozzi, a Democrat who had already served in the House once before. Right. And I would argue, and I have to had this conversation with him, that while he's only one candidate, what he was sort of hearkening, and he, by the way, the reason Chip Roy reminded me of him was because he told him to stop running his mouth because the noise is not what the American people want. He did that on the floor of the House, by the way. It was like, stop. That's not working. Stop. And Chip was just blah, 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 blah. But what Tom Suozzi did is he said, look, I'm a Democrat. I come from, I have a long history in the Democratic Party. And here's what the Democratic Party means. You don't want all the noise. You don't want all the calamity. We want to get things done, truly get things done. And sometimes that means you got to work across the aisle. You have to make compromises. And he would talk about the border, honestly. And I think for the party that Tom Suozzi is a great example of sort of how to elevate the party at large, but also, again, bring the American people and the constituents back to this idea that the Democrats are the grown-ups in the room, the ones getting the things done.
I'm happy that Tom Suozzi won. He's now my congressman. I can say that. But I will say this, that it's not a fair comparison for others to emulate simply because he was running against a brand new novice woman, whereas he had a whole, machine in place.
Yeah,
he had a track record. It was a good track record. So we can draw some conclusions,
right?
But it wasn't a template for everybody. But yeah, his slogan was "Let's fix this," and that works. It's maybe not as good as the Democrats fight. I'm confusing my slogans. Democrats fight for the people. Proud American, proud Democrat. But yeah, he's effective, but again, he was well known in Nassau County, Long Island.
Right.
So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, no campaign is going to be perfect, but we can get that 1 or 2 or 3% by following the branding Democrats playbook because, man, again, what we said in the very beginning here, most Americans agree with Democrats issue by issue. They just don't know that's our side, not their side.
Yeah.
So if we can do the branding, the long-term, large-scale branding to the public, get the word out. That's how we start moving that 1 or 2 or 3% that makes all the difference in these elections.
Yeah, I think they're reachable. I think cohesive messaging, you and I talked about that before we started recording. Cohesive messaging from the people who have the largest platforms out there who want to advance this stuff is also crucial, because you can cast the net really far. And that's what we need to be doing right now. How can we drive these slogans for the Democrats? Like, obviously, like from the little things to the big things, but how can we make them so sticky that people are like, that's what they remember, like a jingle?
Yeah, well, again, if we can get Democrats to agree from on high that Democrats fight for the people, Daryl and I, we are thought about many different slogans. Democrats fight for the people encompasses who Democrats really are.
Yeah.
It depends what the graphics are. Do we italicize, the word fight or the people, or do we have an exclamation point? Do we have quotation marks? So it can be written in many different ways. But we need money and resources behind us to have a unified message. Early on in the book, Branding Democrats, we'd say Democrats make a fatal mistake. We make every candidate start from zero.
Mm.
So if JoJo from Jerz wants to run for Congress, well, you're already known. But if you have to go out in your district, you have to introduce yourself as opposed to, oh, this woman represents the Democratic values. Clearly, I'm going to vote for her.
Mm-hmm.
We make every candidate start from zero, so they introduce themselves. It's a waste of resources.
Right.
Push the party, not the person. The party, not the person. Most Americans agree with us, not with them.
Yeah, we've seen so much of this. I think about it as like a minority, oppression of the minority. I mean, that's really what on so many issues where you see that's the statistics, particularly on gun violence, and where so many people that are in favor of reasonable gun violence prevention measures, and yet, the minority is able to impose this reality upon us where we don't do anything about guns. It's just,
we've let the other side set the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Obama's coming and Biden are coming after your guns.
Yeah.
Guns, every time a Democrat wins, gun sales spike.
Yeah. It's the weirdest thing. We haven't come for their guns yet.
You would think Remington and the other gun manufacturers would support Democrats.
You would.
We help their business because the wackos come, oh, a Democrat won, they're going to come and get my guns. Show me a Democrat that says we want to confiscate your guns. No, there aren't any. Show me a prominent Democrat who says defund the police.
Right.
Yeah.
No, right.
There aren't any, but they throw that in our face. Well, you guys want to defund the police. No, that was a few marchers and people who said that. It was no congressman, no senator, no president.
Mm-mm. No, in the meantime, you're the ones who, by the way, allowed the guy who incited an attack on our Capitol Police, which was deadly, by the way, to get away with it. So, and then not.
Yeah, but you saw what the Republican National Committee, this is why I said early on in this conversation, we're working with one hand tied behind our back because we try to be truthful. The Republican National Committee, the RNC, actually had the gall to say, talking about January 6th, it was normal political discourse.
Yeah.
January 6th.
Right.
Those were the words.
Yeah.
Legitimate
political discourse. Yeah.
Legitimate.
Yes. Yeah, that was Rana. That was RP to her too. Not that she's dead, but her.
Our old MSNBC friend, Rana.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, upside down, inside out. And also, again, so many of those Congress people who those officers were crushed for and beaten with flagpoles carrying our American flags, by the way. So many of those Congress people went and voted against awarding those police officers medals of honor for what they did to protect them that day.
Protect them, protect their lives. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, but they're back the blue. They back the blue, and it's a bunch of bullshit. Meanwhile, if you ask a Harry Dunn or an Officer Fanone, you
Yep.
know, who it is that really has their backs, it's the Democrats. So last kind of two questions. I said they're hand in hand. Number one, again, how can the average American citizen, how can, you know, I call Ma and Pa MAGA, the average American MAGA, but like, how can someone who might be listening to this or watching this podcast and be like, okay, this sounds fantastic for the Democratic Party to do, but how can I help in this regard? And then what gives you hope for the future?
Oh dear, you should have told me this at the time. They can buy the book Branding Democrats
Yeah.
only because it is sort of from the bottom up. And you
Mm-hmm.
have a sense of how you can participate. I was telling you, I think before we started recording, that Daryl, my son and co-author, have been appearing at Democratic clubs, so local clubs. So if you buy the book, you like what it says, Joe likes it,
Mm-hmm.
take it out to your local Democratic club as a starting point to say, maybe what we're doing isn't the only way to do it. Maybe that we should look at this new way of thinking about how to campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of hope, I used to say the young people, that's a standard cliche answer, but I'm scared shitless lately because they're getting their news from TikTok.
Oh yeah.
And I'm on TikTok, but there's a lot of other people who don't care about the truth on TikTok.
Oh yeah.
So what I have to say is it's all hands on deck. We cannot sit back. We cannot take this lightly. The threat against America, it's an existential threat. Yes, as everybody says, we always hear it's the most important election, but my God, there has never been any election even remotely as important as the upcoming one.
No.
Nothing.
No. And it's not. It's not hyperbolic or histrionic to say those things. It's true. Again, they keep telling us that what they're going to do and what they're not going to do, and there's certainly nothing good in there for the American people. But what gives me hope is a book like this, is a conversation like this, is the connection that somebody else in the universe made between myself and yourself, so that we could have a conversation like this, so that people who might not be aware of you in the book and that they can bring this to their friends and have those conversations that truly are that relational organizing work that really does change minds and hearts. That gives me hope. And that, we are continuing to elevate the truth and not just succumbing to the constant deluge of shit flooding the zone of shit that they want us to succumb to, that we're still out there amplifying the truth and standing up for democracy and trying to get as big a coalition as possible to stand up and fight. And if they feel like they can't, if I always say this, but maybe Joe Biden isn't your dream date, right? Like maybe he's not your cup of tea. Maybe he's not your ultimate candidate. Maybe he's not your perfect candidate. You're never going to probably find one, but that's fine. He's their choice right now is a binary one between a responsible, competent steward of democracy and lifetime public servant, and the guy putting unified Reich in his propaganda videos that promises to be a dictator, but only on day one, and loves echoing Hitler. Like
and calls us vermin and poisoning the blood of America.
Right.
Yeah.
All intentional, by the way.
And all intentional. And again, it's the party, not the person. Joe Biden is a flawed candidate, as every candidate is, but he represents the values of the Democratic Party. And Mr. and Ms. American, most things that you truly care about is what the Democrats care about and fight for. Yeah. We're fighting for you.
Yes. And last thing I'll say really quickly before we read one quote off the back of the book is Marjorie Taylor Greene, bless her heart. She also cut a great ad to this point where she said, Joe Biden and the Democrats want the largest social spending of like programs of any president since FDR. They want to finish the New Deal. Like, so she went off. I don't know if you remember that. She went on.
Was that MTG or Boebert?
No, it was MTG.
Okay.
She empty like EMPTY, empty, MTG. Yeah, she went on and on about it. I will find it and send it to you because she got. I remember Joe Biden actually turned it into an ad. Yep. He's like, "You're goddamn right, I am." Like this is. She identified all the things that they don't want to do for the American people, like it was a bad thing, like beating babies. Not killing puppies. I'm just kidding. But like all the good things that they wanted to do. And she was like, this is terrible. This is the future you want. Like, yeah, that's actually the future we want.
And good schools
and good
and
schools.
clean air and clean water.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
And
protecting women and protecting
for criminal rapists to be held accountable and like
yeah,
go to prison.
and you know, I did a TikTok once about when I went to school, we had fire drills. We didn't have active shooter drills.
Yeah. 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 That's for me, that's the craziest one. I worked in education. I'm the mom of 2 kids, and that's my number one issue. I refuse to accept that as my reality where I want my kids' teachers. I worked in education. Let me tell you right now, teachers, probably a lot of them should not have guns. Okay, I'm just gonna say, and if they don't trust these teachers to be teaching history or math, but they're gonna hand them a Glock, like what the hell are you doing? But I don't want to have to memorize my kids' outfits when they leave for school because I know the parents of so many of these shootings were not able to identify their children.
I can't even listen to that. That just
I
makes
know.
me. I have
I know.
grandkids. Yeah, I can't even listen to it. That's just ridiculous.
And again, it's tyranny of the minority because most of Americans do not want to have to deal with this. And so that's why we have to vote, and we have to vote blue, and we have to read books like this. I'm going to read this last quote because it's important. State Senator, you're going to have to help me. Elijah Reichklin Melnick.
Yeah.
Okay, it's on the back of the book, Reichklin Melnick, and I apologize if I butchered that name. But Branding Democrats is the urgently needed new playbook for how Democrats can focus on building the party's brand for the long term. It should be required reading for anyone in Democratic politics.
Well, thank you for saying that. I would just say for anyone, he wrote that in Democratic politics, but anybody who cares about Democratic politics, I would expand that.
Yeah, and I would expand it even to anybody who cares about democracy, frankly, because that is what is at stake in this election. And I just wanted to thank you again so much for the book, for the time, this conversation. I'm so happy to have now cultivated this relationship. I look forward to talking to you more and working with you more because I think I'm such a fan of thinking differently, of approaching problem from a different angle, because that's why things get stagnant and they get stuck. And you're like, well, whoa, have you tried anything different? No. Well, what do you think is going to happen? It's the definition of insanity. So this is great because it's a different approach to how we can get that message from A to B.
I love it. I love your work, Joe. Again, I don't want to belabor the point, but I'm a fan, a big fan. So I was thrilled when you asked me to be. We have a podcast, Branding Democrats podcast, on Apple and Spotify, and hopefully we can get you as a guest one day.
Yeah,
yeah, that'd be great. And let's definitely keep the relationship going because it's groups like this. We get, as I say so often, we need to get traction. You know, I meet you, you meet me, you introduce me to somebody. I've been talking to a couple of congressmen, several congress people, and step by step, we start to have a difference. 6 months to the election, so we got to really buckle down.
Yeah, and we have also this other thing in common where neither of us came out of a political space. You know, you're a businessman. This wasn't what you expected to be doing with your time and resources, right? But the extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. And I'm a single mom in a Jersey suburb who was like, holy shit, we have to do something. And you're a businessman in Long Island who's like, holy shit, we have to do something, so much so that you and your son wrote this incredible book. So we do need all hands on deck right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, thank you. Everybody, again, the book is Branding Democrats, top to bottom, Reimagining of Campaign Strategies by Ken Weber and Daryl Weber, and it's available everywhere right now. And there's
it's available on Amazon.
Amazon. It's available on Amazon right now, which is everywhere pretty much for most people, to be honest. And there's a podcast of the same name, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and check
Branding Democrats, yes.
Branding Democrats. Well, thank you so much again, Ken. I enjoyed this conversation. I feel motivated as fuck right now. Like, I just want to go out and be like Brandon shit all over the place. And I don't mean Brandon like Brandon, because Dark Brandon.
Branding, ING. Yeah.
But Brandon, Dark Brandon energy, talk about branding. Dark Brandon energy, super effective. We've seen that really resonate with moving people, inspiring people, firing people up, all of those good things. Thank you again to my guest, Ken Weber. This is an incredible conversation. And that concludes this episode of the Are You Effing Kidding Me podcast. See you guys next time. Thanks, Ken.